Joey, you are very welcome to Baby Gel Unlocked. Thank you so much for being here today with us.
Pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
Great. And to be honest, Joey, the reason I came across you was because of all the wonderful work you're doing in the earlier sector. You've a very, very popular blog that's happening at the minute, talking about a lot of issues and critical challenges and really good practice in the early years. And some of the topics that I've covered so far in this podcast, which was great to see. Listeners would have heard in the intro as well about your research and your dissertation and all the work that you're doing for men in childcare. So all of these wonderful topics we will get into. But to start, right, just to start with very, very basics, can you tell us a little bit about you, Joey, and why you ended up in early years?
Yeah, sure. I suppose I ended up in early years by accident. When I came out of secondary school, social work was the direction I wanted to go in. I was always big into coaching. I've always done extra work with children while I was at schooling, but it was never a direction I thought I'd send my career. But I did 2 years of studying social studies, and it just was too heavy. I just found I was too young. I wasn't emotionally mature enough to be dealing with the complex issues that was going with it. And I was pushed into a work placement in an autistic unit locally where I'm from, and something just clicked. So I flipped over to childcare. I started from the very bottom. I went with level 5, level 6. I did link level 7, and then my degree at level 8. So and I've been doing it for 18 years, and it's the career that I've watched my children come through with me. It's been phenomenal. It's something that I'm really passionate about and love.
And what's the thing, Joey? Because I had a similar experience to you. I kind of just fell into it. Initially, I was working for Concern Worldwide. You know, the street fundraisers that look for bank details on the street? That was me. Yeah. And I could teach you how to avoid, because I know all the ins and outs. But the thing about that street fundraising job was it actually opened up my eyes to education and nutrition and how it benefits children long term. I was very interested in a project with Concern Worldwide, but same as you, started from the bottom, went into, say, level 5, level 6, and worked my way up the same way. But what for you kept you in early years? What was that thing that you were like, oh my God, I can't get enough of this, or this is just something that's clicking? What was that?
I was very lucky. I've never really job hopped in early years. I worked for a company called Bright Horizons for 10 years in Ireland, and I was with them from day one till the very last day, when they moved out of Ireland, and then the 2 managers who were over Bright Horizons took over the service that I'm in at the moment. So I've been in the same building 2 buildings. I've been in for 18 years. And I think what's kept me in it is that the natural evolution of early years has, it's so much deeper than people understand. It's like when I first went in, I was one of these people who thought glorified babysitting, all of this. And I was able to then watch the sector grow and evolve and develop. And I was moving along with that. And then I was lucky enough, with Early Childhood Ireland, I went over to Norway on a study group. And it was one of these light bulb moments where I just seen children playing and children working within outdoor environments and really just being children. And something just clicked in me, and I knew this is where I was supposed to be. And ever since then, my whole philosophy on early years has flipped. So I've become a massive advocate of play and stripping back the idea of wanting to be a primary school teacher and all that's deep within the sector, and just really pushing the importance of those first 5 years that we have with children before they head to primary school.
And it's interesting the way you've said that about stripping back that primary school lens, because I very much agree with you. We're kind of like schoolifying preschool to compete, you know, and I understand that we're looking for the same recognition in terms of paying conditions, but the issue is we shouldn't have to then change what our actual job is, which is to focus on play. You know, we see that happening.
I think we're sacrificing what makes early years so important to try and become professionalized, and we should be professionals. And that's not we should be seen as the same bracket as primary, secondary, third level. We should be called educators. But we're trying so hard to show what we can do. I think we're losing the magic of childhood, because when children go to primary and secondary school, they're stripped back of what I believe is the magic of childhood. They're conforming, they're falling in line, they're following the lessons where we have them at the purest. We have children when they're looking at us wide-eyed and just wanting to be children, and we can really dig into that, and we're losing that by trying to get them for this ready for school term, which bugs the life out of me. and we're trying so hard to get them ready for primary school work that we're missing out on those key 5 years that we have them for in early years. And if we can just flip our mentality and own the importance of early years education and run with that as a profession rather than wanting to be like a primary school teacher, I think we could go far.
Yeah, and I think I 100% agree with you. It's value in play and not wanting to lose that. And it reminds me, Joey, of one of the blog posts that you wrote about art. And I've talked about this before, and even in my research, it's the whole idea of that product-based art and how regimented it is. And the way I saw it in practice was very, very, it was daunting because I was part of that practice, the practice where we as adults cut out the shapes. You were the exact same. You cut out the shapes, you paste it down, and you tell the child how to do it, when to do it, and what child gets to do it. There's no like, you get to do a second one. There's no choice. And when I read your blog post about art, it was resonating with me so strongly because you say the same thing. So like, what is your experience then with even say art in practice, and how would you like it to be?
Well, I personally believe art's everywhere. When every single thing that a child does, art is in every single activity, outdoor play, indoor play, it's everywhere. But when we talk about this process-based art, product-based art, shart, which is what I call it, which is crap art, or just stuff that we're trying to give to parents that will keep them happy, we're losing that, all of the amazing things that children are capable of doing by trying to get them to follow instructions rather than us stepping back and following the child. And I think we're in such a hurry to make sure that they're creating something that looks beautiful and look amazing on the wall, that we're forgetting about the creativity, the imagination, the wonder, everything that happens when children are allowed to just be free. They'll run with it. They'll create something that we could never even fathom, and it's so much better than that perfect bunny that's sitting on the wall with lovely big ears and big eyes and perfect paper plate stuff, which it happens everywhere. I've done it for years myself, and it took a long time for me to really embrace the madness of free art. It's like that chaos is beautiful to be a part of. Like when there's glitter everywhere and there's paint everywhere, and when children are discovering that my hands can go into paint and it's mixing colors, and that's where learning is for in early years. That's where we're teaching children how to be wonder and how to be children. Where if we're cutting out shapes and holding their hand to stick down an eyeball, like we're banging our head off a wall. We're not getting anywhere. We're just making children conform a lot earlier than they should be.
And I can recognize the same pattern you have, because I was the practitioner that would go into the room and I would have put, the big rolls of paper. I would have put them on the ground, and I would have just had trays of paint, and the children, if they wanted, would just dip in and out their feet, and they would do painting and dance. But they loved it. But I loved watching my colleagues as this happened, because they looked at my room and they would get stressed, because all they could see was the mess that they had to deal with after, or, Chloe, how are you going to deal with that and everything else? And I'm going, the floor has to be mopped anyway. They can have snack over here while this is getting dealt with afterwards. But for now, look at how much fun they're having. But they couldn't see the fun. They couldn't hear the laughter because they were so wrapped up in the afterwards and their duty of what if they slip. The health and safety aspect. And that concerns me. Like, health and safety and art can coexist, but not the way we're doing it at the minute. It's very, I find it to be very clinical now, the way art is becoming.
Well, we're saturated with Pinterest, Twinkle, TikTok, all of these things that are, like, recently I've seen this rubber thing that they're asking us to put in children's fingers and to hold a pencil, and on TikTok now, we're just being saturated by content that it was detrimental to what I believe to a child's imagination. We're watching them and groups are sharing them saying it wouldn't be great if we did this or a sunflower like this, and all I'm thinking is this is just somebody looking for clicks, and it's really sending us in the wrong direction. Whereas all we need to do is put as many materials as we can on a table and give small, short instructions. Put a real sunflower or real pictures of a hedgehog on a table and see what we come up with. You're probably going to deviate in 100 different directions, but that's the beauty of what we do. We shouldn't be looking to sit children down and say every one of them doing the exact same thing. Like we push individuality so much that we lose it in our activities, and we're always talking about supporting the individuality of the child and developing them holistically. But when we're doing activities like everyone doing the same, it's just going against everything that is what is early years. So it's It's definitely changing though. I'm super grateful for the early years, and I love being a part, and I don't want to be battering down on anyone, but we are changing and evolving, but I do think we're not evolving quick enough. I think we need to speed up the process, and that is probably because we have nobody to pull us in the right direction. We have a lot of guidelines and frameworks and all this, but we've nobody saying this is the way we should be going, and we're kind of 50 million branches under one tree doing our own thing rather than all going in the same direction.
And I think as well on the grounds, because I agree with you, there's so many different voices in the sector. But part of the issue and part of the great thing about it is that you can have freedom to control your little pot of land. But what I know that people struggle with is it depends on, say, who your mentor is, who your manager is, who your inspector is. And you have some of these services that have wonderful relationships with very open-minded management or, regulatory support. But then you have other areas in the same potential county or just another county beside them, and they end up having someone that's very regimented or very, very linear in the way they think. And then that informs how and what you can do in your practice, which can be very limiting. And I wonder, Joey, listening to your practice and your work, do you use process-based art now? And have you always done process-based art?
No, I like now it would be definitely like I'm only out of a classroom for the first time in 18 years since September. So I was an in-ratio manager for a long time, and so I'm lucky enough that I have a team that have worked with me for a long time. We do still have parts of it. I'm not going to sit here and say we're perfect. We do still have that bunny rabbit that bugs the life out of me pop up from time to time. But a lot of what we do is the girls and the team just giving the children their material. So, for example, today we got a big ton of sand, and when you get new sand into any early years service, it's like Christmas, and it was put into the sandbox, and there was no buckets and spades, and we didn't panic. So, and to be fair, I was listening to one of your previous podcasts, so one of your speakers talking about, is there a need for bucket or spades? And the children did their own thing. They went and got pots and pans and paintbrushes from inside, and they built towers and put the paintbrushes inside, and it was much more beneficial than giving them buckets and spades. And we've seen the children actually active in their own work. And that's a lot of my practice in air service at the moment, and it's something that we'd be quite proud of, I think we've been doing a lot of play-based learning a lot quicker than a lot of others would have been. So we've been ahead of the curve a little bit, and that would have been coming from us from Bright Horizons, who was a big, massive company that really were forward thinking. And you see a mix and match of both. And if I see it, I'll talk about it and say, why are we doing it, and ask questions. I'll never try and make somebody feel bad because they're only trying to do what's best. But it's easier to have a difficult conversation like that than ignore it. And I do feel we ignore it quite a bit within the sector.
And I'll definitely just have a shout out there to Claire Devlin, because that's who I was talking to with the outdoor stuff. And that's the thing, just being exposed to other people's practice, you realize, well, I can actually question this. So like you questioning, do we need buckets and spades? Because of course you associate sand with buckets and spades. That's how we grew up. That's what you associate with. And it's tools as well to build. But I can already imagine the excitement of using something like a paintbrush, something that's not associated typically with sand, that the children would experience and just be like, oh, I can do this. It's also freedom for them, because they also are now breaking down those barriers that they thought always existed. You can only play with buckets and spades in the sand. No, you can have paint in it, you can have brushes, you can, all these different textures in it, that they can get so much more from it.
Yeah, and like the bucket and spade, that's great, but it gives you one option. That's it. It's to put sand in the bucket, turn it upside down, and you have a sandcastle. But without that obvious item that you would have in sand, you've opened up the possibilities to millions of options. And the children have proven that themselves by us not panicking and going, no, we have no buckets and spades, just let's see what happens. And they took over. And this is what I would say to a lot of people is, why are we watching TikTok and Pinterest and all these things looking for activities when we have 20 of the best resources looking up at us and saying, hello, we're your tool here. So to use us. And the children are the greatest resource that we can have. They'll give us the best activities. They'll lead us in a direction that we will not go wrong and not harm children long term, because we're facilitators of children. Like we're in their space. They shouldn't be in our space. And I think if we use them more and use them as a tool to build your curriculum, you're flying. It's high quality practice in my opinion.
And it's because they, like, I find children, I think was it Ken Robinson did a TED talk, but he was talking about research to do with imagination.
Yeah.
And he was talking about the research that was done about paperclip and how many things can you do with a paperclip. Now, for people that are listening, if I am getting this wrong, I probably am. I have a terrible memory, but I know there was some sort of research done with an object. So say it was a paperclip, and it was testing very young children all the way up to teenage years. And they were looking at, well, how many things can you use this paperclip for? And I cannot for the life of me remember the numbers, but the idea was when children were getting up to say 4 or 5, they had hundreds or maybe thousands of ideas that were so innovative. But for some reason, then when they went into mainstream school, as Ken Robinson would have said, that was educated out of them. Imagination, creativity is educated out of them. And I very much think it's linked to that idea of art, how we're approaching art. And it's kind of daunting to think that we're educating creativity out of children, when so many of our jobs now are jobs that would have never been a type of job 30 years ago. Someone created it, it's invention, that's starting from imagination. And if we're stifling that, what are we going to do?
And it's funny you've mentioned Ken Robinson, because his quote, I use his quote for everything and I'll probably stumble over now that I'm talking about it. We don't grow into creativity, we grow out of it. Or what if we don't grow into our creativity, we grow out of it, or rather we are educated out of it. And I believe that to my core, that children, and from my own experience going through school, which was a long time ago, I'm watching my 2 children going through primary school at the minute and my daughter moving on to secondary school. You do see that joy being not sucked out of them, but they're trying to do what's best. They're trying to follow exams, and they're losing that magic that makes them children. And if we speed up that process in early years, they've no hope of fighting for it when they get to primary and secondary school. We should be embracing it. We should be going all in with it and forgetting about primary school, forgetting about secondary school, and focusing on what we do as early years educators. And it's being imaginative and creative and wonder and being that child. There's an example I will always use. I always get told, but I'll never forget it. A girl said to me, I would love to have that kid in my class. And I said, oh, okay. And she was a teacher coming in. I said, okay. And I said, why would you like to have her in your class? She goes, because she's really quiet and, she sits there and she listens. And I was like, give me the lad that's spinning out of control in the corner 100 times over the one that's sitting and listening and terrified to speak. And for me, that's terrifying to think that quiet children are good children, where the mad ones are seeing as a problem, whereas if embrace their madness, jump in and be mad with them. And like, I'm 42 years of age, and when I go to work, I feel like I'm about 8. So because you're playing with children and you're embracing, you're tapping into your childhood every single day. So I think it's important that we stop pushing them into school and just focus on what we're doing. And art is a great way to do that, and just giving them the resources to be creative and be children, and you'll fly.
It's interesting you've mentioned the really quiet child, because that was something that I would have originally thought as well. I was the quiet child. Me, like, people listening to this, not a hope. Yeah, but why was I quiet? It was because of all the systems, the rules, I need to be good, don't speak out, etc., etc. But even in my research, Joey, the PhD work, I was looking at children in terms of how they were navigating power. And one child in particular was very passive, as in what you just described, the child that would sit, yes, no problem, I will do this. No, I won't complain. I will do what you tell me. But it wasn't until I actually talked to her about art. I said, 1-to-1, do you like art? And she paused and she said, it makes me really uncomfortable. The educators didn't know this, but she did not like the texture of paint. But also, if she got any paint on her clothes, even a speck, she was preparing for her parents to give out to her when she went home. So she was living with that stress, that anxiety internally. But on the outside, this little girl, to an educator, was the perfect child, the child that sat in silence. But what I drew out of that was, that is the child you should be most worried or concerned about. If you're not having one-to-one conversations, of course you can have quiet children who are very immersed in deep play. But what I just tapped into by having this conversation with this girl was, she was dealing with stress, anxiety, fear, while she's doing something as simple as a family tree. I mean, that's the kind of work that we should be looking out for, not a case of tick the box, you've done so good, you've done your product, here you go. Because for all we know, we're actually causing an awful lot more stress and anxiety in children that we are not aware of.
And 99% of the time, they're taught behaviors. They're not behaviors that a child is picking up themselves. Some children maybe, but most of the time they're taught behaviors, and we're celebrating it because they're not causing us the stress of like preschool jobs. Preschool is supposed to be stressful. It's supposed to be busy, and like we're so worried about everything else. Like we're worried about upsetting the parent, or we're worried about Tussle coming in and doing an inspection, or we're worried about like, all of these massive things. We're forgetting about the very most important thing, and that's the children. And parents are very important to me. They're very important to my service. But I don't care what they think when it comes to our curriculum in terms of how we're educating the children, because that speaks for itself. And if we can get better at speaking to parents and saying this is the way it should be, and this is holding information evenings or whatever it is you need to do to get parents on side with play-based learning, and not be expecting that perfect solar system going home at the end of the week. If we can really get ahead of that at the beginning, it puts us on the right foot to actually eating high quality education for the full time that they're with us.
Because I understand that, because I think a lot of the time when we talk about partnership with parents, there's this idea that we have to basically be told what to do by parents and told what to do by management, but we forget that we are the professionals, we are educated, we know how to work with children. And like you've described earlier, Joey, you're talking about developing curriculum with children, but a parent on the outside who's never in the environment won't see that. And a lot of our job is very much educating parents as much as it's educating children, because we're trying to break away from that babysitting role, that stigma that we're living under, but also we're looking for parents to also value us more than, you know, just what we produce. Being able to say, well, your child went home today proud because they shared their toy for the first time, you know, or they recognize something.
And it is difficult for educators because it's a paid service most of the time. And when parents are paying for something, the child can be seen as possibly a product, and you're expecting a return from a product. Which is difficult to maneuver around and try and say, like, your child is not a product. We're not trying to prove anything here. We're just trying to educate the children and give them the best possible experience they can while they're with us. And that's a hard wall to break down. It's a wall I don't think it will ever break down until this whole public-private discussion is broken down. But that's for another. You can do a podcast with somebody else on that one.
We'll bring you back.
I'll just get too angry talking about it. Like if we can remove that product element from our, it's deep in our subconscious. It's not something that we're actively aware of. But if we could just get rid of that whole, yes, they're paying for a service and we need to provide a service to keep a parent happy, then restraints might loosen a little bit and we might relax a little bit and actually start to embrace our curriculum and program and play-based learning and messy play and messy art, and not worrying about the room being sterile and clean all the time. Like all those things will start to break down and then become a little bit more natural within our practice.
And it's funny as well, Joey, because I've experienced firsthand, same as you, parents that you know are expecting something when the child goes home, but it's always building up towards that idea that my child's working towards being the best in the class, or potentially for moving on to primary school. And I also can understand the other side of it is parents also don't want their child to fall behind or be the child that struggles. So it's also putting pressure on us to produce the child in the way that they think they should be molded or coerced or changed in whatever way. But we see learning so differently. Like, I mean, like you've talked about working with, say, children with additional needs, or children just in general in terms of artwork and free flow art. The imagination and the different ways of thinking that children in general are able to produce, if we made space for that, you know, that would be huge.
And just tipping on this children with additional needs type topic, product art doesn't allow you to be inclusive to all children, because it doesn't, because there's so many instructions and we're trying to get the same children to do the same thing. There is, and I'm sure anyone that listens to this, they will think of one child in the classroom and they'll come to the forefront of their mind. You are not going to be able to follow the steps that you're expecting them to step, and you're going to have somebody holding their hands and getting them through it and giving a parent a piece of work that is belonging to the adult and not the child. Whereas if we just got rid of that need for everything to be perfect and just supplied materials, just facilitated all those materials and stepped back and seeing what happens. Every child will jump in. I've seen children with additional needs that would never have done art jumping into activities like that. And whether it's putting hands in art and feeling the texture, or putting their face into the bubbles and blowing the bubbles and feeling the bubbles go across their face, there is learning in those small little moments that is endless, and it's so much more beneficial than us holding their fingers and sticking things down and saying, well done, you've done that yourself. So if we really just reflect on that level of practice, we just become super inclusive to everybody. And yes, there's some children who don't want to be involved, and that's okay too. You can, if they're off in the block area doing something or blocks, there's a million activities you can do around art in a block area.
And it's funny because I find it, I remember in practice, like dealing with teams, like seasons and stuff like that. It was the same team and the same product throughout the year. So yourself, Joey, would you have any kind of practical advice, or kind of how you would work in practice that you potentially do use a thematic approach, but how do you make sure that you're not going down the route of like a product based, but you're going process?
I think the big thing is shifting your language. So it's not let's make a bunny. It's like, let's explore lines and shapes and be creative today and see what we can all, like, here's a picture of a bunny that I have today. How can we make it? And celebrate, like, treat every single mark on a piece of paper like it's the Mona Lisa, and let them children feel that sense of gratitude for what they do. And I think that's a really big one. And then offer up a real invitation to be creative. And I think the best way to do that, as I've said probably a million times throughout this, is just pump the place full of materials, and don't worry about mess and glitter and art and sweeping the floor. Just let them be creative and watch and follow their direction, and they will take you down the right path. And I suppose log out of TikTok and log out of Pinterest and all that type of, like, just stay away from that type, because it does. I do find myself looking at it and going, oh my God, that's amazing. But when you're looking at it, the big red flag is there's a set of adults' hands that's making those activities. There's no children in there. And I've always thought, geez, I should do a TikTok where children are making stuff. But it would be the same thing every single week, because like with paint, the big thing, I've only this a couple of weeks ago with paint, the children discovered that they can make brown paint, right? And the reason why they discovered they can make brown paint is because they mixed every single color that was there in, but they discovered that turns into brown. And to me, that was better than going through the color scheme or color. They figured out this is how to make brown if we put all these big colors together. So we took a step back a little bit and we just threw red and white in, and they mixed it. This is how we make pink. And it was just a really natural way of teaching children about colors, rather than this is red and this is blue and going through the wheel. And it's outdated practice that should be thrown out the window, and and more and we are embracing them. I know there's so many educators that I speak to that are here from when I was at college. There's so many people shifting in the right direction. So we are getting there. And then I suppose my last one would be just let them be free. Let them have that sense of freedom. And if they don't want to make that bunny, that's okay. If they want to make a rocket or a spaceship, off you go and make a rocket and a spaceship. Show me how you're going to make a rocket and a spaceship. Because the most important thing in that lesson isn't the adult's idea. It's where the child's mind is going. And we need to focus on that, rather than, oh my God, this was team of the week was bunnies and now we're doing space, and my planning is ruined, and if somebody comes in, I'm not doing what I've wrote in my planning, who cares? Own it. If Tulsa come in the door and say, yep, we had planned to do bunnies this week, but the lads wanted to do space, so we're doing space. I'm like, they'll be more impressed with that than you knocking children back into your direction. I hope, anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's true, because like there's a great recognition. I find any inspectors I've worked with are very much on that level as well, because a lot of them are coming from early years backgrounds. So that helps, that support of recognizing, yes, okay, look, my plan went to absolute crap, and now we have to start with space, but we've no materials, and now we're kind of starting from the start. But the children, I'm following the children. And it's funny, Joey, because I would question as well, there's some preschools I would have worked in where I did question people working in the sector, should they be? Because there is an element where There's people who don't want to play in the rain or be out in the rain.
Yeah.
There's people that don't want to do art because they don't want to actually be engaged with paint. They don't want to do the planning. They find documentation stressful. And what I think is really, really difficult with that is there are other people, say like me, like you, other listeners, that would just embrace all of that, like love the messy play, get the wellies on, let's get out. And I think there might be an awareness now of what the job entails and what people need to be able to do the job to a great quality standard. And sometimes I would question if that means some people just aren't suited to be in the job, and that's okay.
Yeah, see, I've always had thoughts on this, but I've never really articulated it. I'm doing it on a blog where people are going to be watching. Probably isn't the best place to do a push through. We'll give it a whack anyway.
We're here now.
Yeah. So I, coming from a level 5 background, coming from somebody who worked all the way up through the stages of early years, I do believe we should be a degree-led service. I do believe that, and there's unbelievable level 5 and level 6 practitioners that I've worked with and that have shaped my practice. But if we really want to move forward as a professionalized sector, we need to become a degree-led service, like over in the Scandinavian countries where you have to go and do 4 years to become an early years educator. We should be spending a lot more time focusing on play and like modules based around building a story sack for 12 weeks has no meaning to us. Something you can cover in an hour where we're not talking enough about play. We're not talking enough about process art when we're studying. There's a lot of, like, we need to know about Piaget and Vygotsky. They're all stuff that we need to know because it's rooted in children development. But we're putting so much time into that there. We're only learning about play-based learning when we're going into practice. And in my opinion, that's too late. We should be really going in with a strong foundation of the importance of play, the benefits of play, how detrimental it is to children if we don't allow them to play. And we're just not doing enough of that in our studies. So I do think the level 5 and level 6 should be weaned out, and we should become a degree-led service. And if anyone's listening to this, that's no disrespect to their level 5s or level 6. I've had the same, but I'm just trying to think forward, thinking for the evolution of the sector that's needed. It needs to become, we can't have staff, we can't have educators coming in that it's a last resort. Like, the early years can't be a last resort. It can't be, I didn't get anything else, so I'm going to go and work in early years, because why would you put yourself in that for starters? And then you're going in and you're miserable and you're bringing the energy down in the classroom, and you're not helping children. This is such an important role. You've 20, in my case, we 20 children in one room and 10 in another. Like, they're the most important things in our job, in our careers, giving them a space where they can be themselves. And if we're going in there and sucking that atmosphere out, and because we're in a job that we don't want to be in, we're causing so much long-term harm that it's I wouldn't even know where to start in terms of speaking about it.
I agree with you. There would be a minority group, I would agree, but definitely a group that would be going into the early years as a default job. And then the issue is, how can we expect society to value us if our internal workers don't value the sector itself? So it's kind of a push between internal and external as well. And I wanted to add to that as well, Joey. It's just what you've been drawn on there about the professionalization of the sector and the level 5 and the level 6. I was so frustrated, okay, just to give context, same as you. I did the level 5 for a year, level 6, worked my way up over a couple of years, then did the PhD for 3.5 years. And it was only when I did my PhD that I learned about power and power dynamics and how power works between adults and children. That was never covered in my full degree, which took 4 years, my master's degree, which was another year. And I was just blown away by the fact that, why is this not being talked about earlier? Which is what, again, fed into my research and this podcast and these discussions. I just felt we need to know more. If we're working with children, we need to understand our role as an adult and the fact that we can influence so much power over them, which influences then what you've talked about, Joey, play. Because if we don't know we're controlling their everyday experiences and we don't realize we're controlling their art or their outdoors, we can't make play in any way meaningful. We're just controlling it every day if we don't know what power is.
And if power is boiled down to the very root of it, I would believe that the more we try to control the classroom, the less control that we have. Because if you're barking, sit down or do this, or you're not listening, like, you're losing control of that classroom because you're not facilitating the needs of what that age group of children need. And when you step into the other side and go, okay, let's open up this classroom and let's see where the children go. All of these biting and scraping, and biting is always going to happen, and scraping and pushing. There's always going to be struggles with children, but they really do start to reduce. And it's a really hard thing for an adult to let go of that control to a group of children. But when you let go of it and give the children the power that they need to be children, you become such a much better educator, and you're not so stressed about being all in control and things spiraling all the time. And there is this, it's in every classroom, there's a power struggle between adults and children, and it's a very, very hard thing to break down unless somebody has a real eureka moment, and they're always going to control that classroom, because we are trying to keep children safe at the end of the day, and we're trying to make sure everybody is okay, and we don't want to be too loose in case something happens, and then we don't have a leg to stand on if something goes wrong. But we need to find a correct balance where children have more of the power than the adult, and I really do think that's where we're getting to, but we're slowly getting there.
Yeah, it has to start with awareness, because like you said, there are power struggles, understandably, because people want to be in control, whether you're a child or an adult. But I think a little bit more responsibility on the adult to at least be aware of these power dynamics. I mean, even when I was doing this work with educators, is recognizing that resistance is participation. So when a child is actively saying no, instead of seeing that as an attack on adult authority, it's not an attack. It's a child choosing no, and that's okay. And letting them, being in a space to permit their no in that space. And it boils down to that kind of basic level of recognizing that's participation in a room. Participation is not children conforming, it's children opting in yes, opting in no, deciding not to listen, deciding to ignore. Allow that space to happen. But it's hard as well, Joey, because I'm learning even how I use language about allowing children and letting children. I was learning as well about the whole idea of, well, you're not letting children be free, or you're not allowing children to be free, because they're already free. We as adults we're just controlling them. So it's the idea of making space for their freedom. Mm-hmm. That's so important to be recognizing.
And I suppose we're in our infancy in terms of letting go of a power struggle, because in my generation growing up, it was do what you're told or move on. And so it's breaking down that I suppose domino of repeated behaviors that we're trying to get to. And it's very early. We're very early, and it was so far behind in terms of that power struggle that you spoke about. But I do believe we're getting there. I do believe we're slowly getting there a lot more throughout the service. But there needs to be a lot more conversation around it. There needs to be honest conversation around it. Educators need to say, do you know what, I am too controlling in my classroom, and have that honest reflection with themselves, because it's not I believe nobody working with children is ever there to harm them. It's just that you're trying to be the best of your ability. But if we have an honest conversation with ourselves and say, do you know what, I am controlling this classroom way too much, and shift the power, the magic happens. When I've seen it firsthand over the last maybe 8 or 9 years, I've seen it happen. I've seen that completely shift in our mentality, and it's amazing to watch. I've watched my 2 children benefited from it as well, and I have 2 very confident children because of it.
Amazing. And I want to shift gears, Joey, because I can't continue a conversation without referring to your dissertation, because you've done a lot of advocacy work for men in childcare. And because you're so long in the sector, you've the wealth of experience and the real lived experience of being a man in a female-dominated sector. So can you talk to us a little bit about your dissertation and what it was called, what you covered?
Yeah, I suppose when I really went in to do my dissertation, I really wanted to avoid doing my dissertation on men in childcare, because it was the obvious thing to do. But it was also something that I'm quite passionate about. And I was talked into it by my lecturers to do it, because it's something that I had all the information for. So I reluctantly went in, and I'm delighted I jumped into it. It was the perceptions and attitudes of male educators in early years. And I've done it from 2 perspectives. So I surveyed 100 parents, and I surveyed, I think it was about 140 educators. So I wanted to get a really big scope, because if you're doing 10 or 12, I felt it wouldn't have been enough for some, because there's so few males in the sector. I felt having a larger group of people would give us a more interesting scope. Really surprised that the public perception was incredibly positive. I had 0 negative responses coming back from any parents. There was other bits, but we can tip into in a second. But it was within the sector that there was more, not a lot, but more of a pushback with comments like any man within a service is a red flag. Why would a man want to work with children, young children? I wouldn't want them changing. One of the questions I asked was, would you be comfortable with a male educator changing a nappy? And within the sector, it was like 54 yes, 46 no, which really surprised me because I've only experienced negativity once in my practice with a parent, and it really surprised me that perception was still out there. And I suppose the big things that I dug into it, there was 2 takeaways from it. One, it's not as open in our sector as we think it is. It's not. There's people hiding deep-rooted prejudice towards males working in the sector. And 2, men just don't want to do the job. They just don't want to be there. For 100 of other reasons. It's quite sad. And like I've been working in 18 years, and I've 5 men I've came across within my building. There's actually one that started in our service the last couple of weeks, but it's definitely something that I believe is reducing. It's actually not picking up, and that would have been what my studies would have shown.
And what kind of reasons would you have found then from men not working to? Because understandably, being a man, and I've had a few students that were male in my lecturing courses, and it's the same discourse that comes out. It is the whole, I'm not being allowed to do my job properly. I'm being separated from younger age groups just because I'm a man. So it is completely rooted in sexism without any reason. We're all Garda vetted, and we're all engaging in the same quality practice at whether you're a male or female. So it is quite a backwards lens, and I have seen it. I've also seen the other side of it as well, Joey, when I was working as an assistant manager. And the manager at the time had about 4 or 5 applications, and she knew straight away that one of them was male because of his name, say it was Ben. She disregarded the rest of them because she wanted a male educator. Yeah. So it was almost like a gold star in a sector, regardless of the quality or the amount of work or experience. It was because they were male. So they were hired straight away, but they weren't suitable for the job that they were doing because they had a year experience, but needed a lot of training compared to someone else that was on the roster, which actually was a degree-led interview. So I found that very interesting. At the end of the day, what ended up happening in that situation was we ended up hiring the male part-time, and then the other person then came in kind of a full-time role. And what ended up happening was then that male could have transitioned into a more full-time role as he got more training, because he just needed more training. It wasn't to do with the fact that he was male. It was just an experience level decision. And that's what I found interesting, that he was given that opportunity because the manager saw the value in having a male, which I absolutely agree with, but it should also be based on more than just your sex.
I was hired for the exact same reason. So 18 years ago, I know, I'll never forget it. And I'm grateful to the person who hired me. But I was hired because I was a man. I was fresh out of college. I had 0 experience, zero. I was literally finished my level 5. And I conducted a 2.5-hour interview, and I was talking about, which I didn't know what was going on. Not that I wanted to be, but it was all about me being a man. And I was like, wow, this is really intense. But when I spoke to the team that I went into, everyone else's interview was 10 minutes long. And when I left, it was like, we've got a man working with us. We've got a man working with us. And that is great that there's people advocating us right there. But I wasn't the right person for the job. I'm glad I got it because my career grew because of it. But I wasn't the right person to go into a brand new service and open up a room and work with children on my own for the first time. But my sex did benefit me there, which is weird talking about it because I'm so used to being a man in childcare now that I don't think about it. But I do, when parents come in and tour with me, they're taken back. They're like, oh my God, there's a man in here. And it's largely positive. As I said, I've only experienced once where a parent refused to allow me to change nappies. I don't want to be changing nappies, but it was part of my job.
And it's funny, Joey, all of us don't want to be changing nappies. It's not a male-female thing. It's, but it's funny as well because I have encountered the more negative side just from different people that I've encountered. And there is a big stigma around, well, like you've already drawn on, why do you want to work with children? And I just think that in itself is such a stigma that would really put off men working in the sector just in itself. And also, to be fair, as a woman working in a female-dominated sector, women are intimidating, in general, because it's that pack mentality. It can be very hard to break through that, especially when you're going into a sector or a service that's already established, again, regardless of your gender. So I can imagine that's partly one of the reasons potentially is that what you came across, that,
Yeah. And one of the big reasons was I suppose call it the locker room banter that lads would have. So I would have been, I was 24, I think, when I started. So I would have been still big into sports and playing soccer and stuff like that. And when the lads found out I was going into children, the natural response was, oh, pedophile, all this type of stuff. And, and you're in a locker room with a load of lads and you're being slagged for that and you're kind of laughing along with it. But inside you're kind of going, oh my God, is this the perception of me? And I was blessed that I had a really good team around me that supported me and kind of shielded me a little bit from all of that negativity till I grew into myself and grew into my career where I was well able to push past it. But one of the big things from speaking to other lads that were studying and looking to go into early years and then decided against it, I spoke to two in particular when I was doing my studies. The big thing was that they were being made fun of by their mates for wanting to work with children, whereas it's one of the most rewarding jobs on the planet. And I think we need to get better at getting into secondary schools and having chats with students and showing the benefits and showing that it's quite normal when you go deep into Europe, that it's quite normal for men to be working with children in early years. But the big thing is that, and then the second one is salary. The salary was a hard one. I'm not going to earn any money for doing this job. I can firsthand tell you that is correct. But yeah, sometimes for the first 10 years of my career, it was very much, I didn't care about salary. I had no children. I wasn't looking for a mortgage. I was just being a normal 25, 26-year-old. When you get older into your career, it does become something that gets into your mind that you need to buy a house. And that is something that almost pushed me out of the sector. And I'm really glad I didn't get pushed out of it because, as I said, I'm working with two amazing women at the moment who have given me everything that I need. So I'm lucky in that sense, but I don't think everybody will be as lucky.
And it's something I've never even considered, because I would have always considered the culture within the sector, not essentially the culture outside of it or your own social dynamics outside of it. Because just as listening to you say, it makes sense because you want to feel proud of the job you're doing. And if you have a certain stigma or a certain view of it, or your surrounding circles do, it's not a job that you want to interview for, let alone do qualifications for, or even go in day to day. But I always find it so interesting, Joey, because what I'd be thinking is you've so many men that are so proud to be fathers, but it is different to then be an educator. So it's trying to navigate those different roles of like, okay, you'll value work with your own children, but potentially would you be an educator? Is it because you're working with other people's children, or is it because of the salary? And the thing I also think of is you've so many male primary and secondary school teachers. So it's not, I would argue, the educator role or working with other people's children and, valuing your own children. It's very much a paying condition side of it, I think. And it's not attractive in terms of that benefit, or the job security. I mean, there's some people that don't get any money and have to sign on the dole during the summer. I mean, with a family and bills, that is not something that you go into lightly. And I think a lot of it is, whether you're male or female, there's a lot of taking for granted the fact that we're all in a caring job because we care about people, we care about children, and we're getting that raw end of the deal because they know that we'll just put up with it. But I think that's changing now. There's a lot of discourse that's changing now.
It is, and it's every discussion that we're ever going to have, no matter what topic we're talking about, it's always going to come back full circle around to the professionalization of the sector. How are we going to become well-paid professionals so we can go and strive as early years educators and just bring what I believe, like the likes of Norway, Sweden, all these places that are just have brilliant systems, and children are in early years till they're 6 and 7 years of age. How are we ever going to get there? And the only way we're ever going to get there is, one, the government need to get their finger out and support us and stop just using us as political talking points when it's time for vote, and keep promising us the world and it falls flat on its face again when we come around to that. They need to get behind early years and show the public how important this area is for children. Like they'll slap on about being the formative years and being the first 5 years being the most important part of a child's life, but go do a campaign about how important it is to be in an early years service. Like when we were on our knees with the prime time investigation, when the disgusting stuff that happened, they were very, very quick to get on top of that. So get in and see us at our best, and when we're actually doing and pushing children in the right direction, and celebrate that and promote that and show off to parents, this is the value of early years education. This is how important it is. And then put your money where your mouth is and help services to actually pay staff the salaries that they need to be to strive within their career. And there's so many of us looking at primary school as a way to go that shouldn't be working in primary school because they're unbelievable early years educators. But you do get to a point in your life where you have to think about your family, you have to think about your house. And we're being let down on that sense. And by letting the staff down, you're letting down a generation of children as well.
It's funny because you just reminded me the government aspect. One thing that I kept noticing, during COVID, a lot of government officials were realizing how much they relied on the earlier sector. But what frustrated me was that conversation died a death once the COVID discussion kind of filtered away. And it's not fair that it should take something massively societal, a profound event or crisis, like you said, even to just become a talking point. It shouldn't even be a discussion anymore.
My COVID experience, I can talk about it from a parental experience with my daughter who was in primary school, and the primary school teachers were incredible. They really stepped up. Then I also we went back to work in June. So I think we were 2 months into COVID and we were back open. And the work that we did, the Zoom calls, like we had staff walking around farms with hand puppets and making live videos to really bring stuff interactive for the children. That went on deaf ears, but the primary school teachers, and rightly so, were put on a pedestal and said, look, we're amazing that you're doing. And early years educators were doing phenomenal work. Like, some of the work that the team did during COVID was just mind-blowing, and it just fell on deaf ears because they're back in there now, and we have, like, the kids are in there, they're safe, and we're getting people to work. And it was a very, very much an eye-opener in two senses. One, we're desperately needed in society, but we're going to be taken advantage of regardless of us being desperately needed. And it was hard to watch and come out of and not get our flowers or our recognition, but not get that level of professionalism to go up a level. That was that we were just staying on the same platform, and we weren't pulled up a little bit, unless it was election time, and then we're the best in the world, and we'll do this and we'll do that.
And I just want to bring it back into practice, Joey. We're unfortunately winding down, but I do agree with you. We have to have you back because we're just going to keep talking for hours about. We've only talked about so many different topics when we started off with one. But what I do want to ask you, Joey, is it's a double-ended question. So the first part of it would be, what area of practice are you most concerned about, and what would your practical advice be to come out of that? So I'm going to leave it open-ended because we've so many areas we've talked about. So what area in practice would you be most concerned about at the minute?
The biggest concern I have, and I wouldn't say it's an area of practice, but it's the turnover of staff. It's the quality of staff that are looking to enter the sector. The CVs are really starting, not that they're bad CVs, they're starting to wind down. We're not getting as many applicants as you would like. Degree-led students are being told to go in a different direction. My concern is that we're not going to have enough high-quality staff I do believe we will get the opportunity to be what we're supposed to be. But I think when we get there, I'm worried we're not going to have enough people to actually run with it, and we'll fall and fail because of it. So it would be staff retention and staff turnover. That would be my biggest concern. I'm worried that we're losing so many quality staff because we're not getting support enough.
Yeah, 100%. And the fact of, if you, let alone quality staff in general, the sector can't function.
You are compromised. Like, people are I'm assuming here because the staff I have are phenomenal, but people are hiring because they got a CV. They're not being hired because of the quality of that person's attributes that they can bring to the team and they can develop the children. We're not being hired on merit anymore. We're being hired out of desperation, and that's scary. That's a scary place to be in for such an important sector, because that's where mistakes happen, and that's where we go into really dangerous territory.
Yeah, malpractice and, just getting lazy or just ignoring things for the sake of an easy life. So area of practice, I suppose, definitely, or area of the sector is definitely the staff turnover. So what would you say would be kind of advice if you're an educator listening now and you are dealing with high staff turnover, you work in a classroom and you don't have any control over staff turnover, you can just do what you can do. What would you have to say to an educator that's in that situation?
I suppose just be that person of change. Own your ethos, own your philosophy in early years, and be brave enough is a word I've used a couple of times. Be brave enough to step into another direction and say, do you know what, this is the way we should be doing things. This is the way it will benefit the children better. Can we have this conversation? Can we open up a discussion away from circle time and group time and only going outside for 20 minutes or not going outside when it's raining? Be brave enough to actually, and there's so many educators that are just so afraid to step into that role, because the quicker we have so many people stepping into that role, the better we become as a sector. And people will fall in the same line of thinking when we have enough voices celebrating all the good stuff that we do, when we're brave enough to step away from the outdated kind of practices that are still deeply rooted within the sector.
All I hear there is basically bring the fun back to that sector, enjoy the job as best you can. And regardless of the staff turnover, it is trying to just focus on why we're there and what our job is and why we were there in the first place. And can I ask you, Joey, starting off, obviously you've told us, and I will end as I will, but you started off telling us about why you're in childcare and your reason for staying in the sector. But I do want to ask is, again, just to reiterate for listeners, that one thing that's keeping you in the sector now, in all the stress of staff turnover and everything, what is it for you that you love most about the sector?
The children. And I have two perfect examples as to why early years education works, and that's my two children. They are two confident, very different, crazy, artistic, sporty people, based on the work that they got from the amazing educators they had throughout their career. I still work with some of them, and I slag them all the time because that's the relationship we have, but they don't know the effect they've had on my children. And I know I've had that effect on hundreds of children as well. So the children are what keeps us in it. When we stop seeing the children as valued parts of our system, that's when I'd be done. I couldn't continue on when the children has been seen more than a product than the child. That's when I would be finished with. So it's the kids that keep me in it. It's definitely not the money. It's definitely the children. Yeah.
Right there with you. And Joey, I have to say, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for all your insight. Thank you so much for all your work in the area, your long-term commitment to it, and fighting the good fight to keep going. So thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate all your insight.
Thanks very much. It's been a pleasure.